Okay, so let's get started. Again, thank you to everybody for joining us. Today is a cooperative workshop. In particular, I've asked Guido Engels sensei and Martin O'Malley sensei to help me take a comparative look at our practice of Wanshu kata and our associated kind of understanding around that kata. What I'd like to do is spend a little time in the first section just looking at a little bit of historical data about the origins of the kata, or what we think we know about the origins of the kata, and then go into more of a, I see everybody's got their dogis on, which is fantastic. We'll go into actual working through the kata, looking at the kata itself, and then hopefully looking at what we understand about some principles, some bunkai, and some applications or oyowaza for Wanshu kata. I'd be very, very happy for anybody to throw in any questions at any time. This is very much an open and collaborative event, but just in order to control kind of the sound, please write your question in the chat function, and then we'll come to that later, and then we'll take a break and discuss questions that come up. Neither myself, and I apologize speaking on behalf of Guido sensei and Martin sensei, I don't think any of us consider ourselves experts in this kata. This is just about trying to, kind of assess what we've learned so far and compare that. And we'd very much like to share that with all of you as well. We have some of our seniors here. John Carlisle sensei, of course, probably the most senior instructor here today. And so very much like to get all of your input, guidance, notes on Wanshu kata. Okay. Does anybody want to say anything or ask anything before we kick off? If you do, please do so now. Okay. Well, it's great to see that some of you have training partners there with you in the dojo. I'm joined today by one of my students. We'll be helping with demonstrations. And by Becca, who is manning the camera here and looking after the technical side of things. Okay. Guido sensei, would you like to say anything?
Oh, no. I have assistant. My son will come when we make bunkai explanation or something. So he will assist.
Thank you. Okay,
enjoy, everybody. Have fun, I think.
Is Martin online? Martin sensei, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just first of all say thank you very much to yourself, James, for coming up with this idea, presenting this opportunity to everybody. I'm actually looking forward to it as an interactive, because I think I'm going to gain as much as I'm going to give, or probably actually gain more than I'm going to give today. And just thanks to everybody for joining from around the world. Yeah.
Absolutely, echo that completely. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the screen there. Okay, so as I said, for the first section, hopefully you guys can see the agenda screen there. For the first section, probably no more than 20 minutes, we'll take a look at some of the data that we've got on the history, the origins, and the lineage. And I'd very much like to get your guys' input on that and flesh out any bits there which you think are important, which are not covered. And then we'll go through and practice kata together. And I thought it'd be interesting if, when we practice the kata, if we note any particular examples of differences in style or performance that we've seen between different teachers and instructors, particularly Okinawan instructors. It's just very useful, I think, to see the variations and to perhaps get an insight into the way that different instructors understand the kata or perceive the kata. So if there's anything that anybody would like to note or put in there, that would be very useful and much appreciated. And then take a look at bunkai. So in this session, we're going to kind of go with the strict definition of bunkai, which means it's in the analysis of principles. So before we go right into the applications, what do we think we understand about the bunkai, or the principles of movement, stances, tactics, skills that are embodied by this kata. And then from there, obviously progress to the applications of those principles, which is the oyowaza in Japanese. And so therefore have a look at what techniques and combinations that we commonly practice or teach when in our dojos. Okay. So I thought what I'd do is pull together a few historical references to Wanshu kata. I'm sure that many of you will be familiar with these, but let me just talk through these. And if anybody would like to jump in and make any comment about any of this, please do, particularly, of course, Martin and Guido sensei, but anybody else as well. So looking around at historical references for Wanshu, one, of course, of the references that we're probably all familiar with, being Matsubayashi practitioners, is Nagamine Shoshin's reference to the kata in his book, Essence of Karate Do. So he said that this kata was brought to Okinawa in 1683 by a Chinese envoy named Wanshu, and then reformed and developed later by karate men around Tomari village. He noted that kakushi tsuki, which means a hidden punch, is the most significant technique adopted in Wanshu. Oh, and by the way, the Chinese characters there on the top right-hand side are the Chinese characters for Wanshu. A more modern researcher, Scott Mertz, who is here in Okinawa now, and I very much respect his research, did some research a few years back into Tomari-te, and he wrote the following, that most of Tomari-te can be traced back to the Saposhi Wangji. So Wangji being another name, alternative name for the same person referred to earlier by Nagamine Shoshin as Wanshu. So Wangji, who was born in 1621, became the leader of a large ambassadorial mission. 500 people usually in those kind of large Saposhi groups that came over from the Qing government in 1683. So then the year there is matching between the two researchers. While he was staying in Ryukyu, he is credited with teaching poetry, calligraphy, and martial arts from the Shaolin Temple to the Tomari gentry, Tomari Bushi class. Wangji stayed with the Gusukuma family for 5 years in Tomari. So one of the things that I've appreciated, I didn't really appreciate before, is the amount of time and the number of people that came over and were part of this Wanshu or Wanji visit. The Gusukuma family were pivotal in kind of both hosting Wangji and then becoming really the source for the system that he taught, which then became source for Tomari-te as we've come to understand it. So I've copied in some of the lineage there as recorded by Scott Mertz. But we can see that the Gusukuma family, 2 or 3 generations, were very, very important in the transmission there. Then we have Makabe Choken, who became famous for his high kicking ability, down to Teiryo Kishin, Ukugiko, and then down to a name which we're probably most familiar with when it comes to Tomari-te, which is Matsumura Kosaku. Oyodomari Koken and Yamada Geiki were all of the same generation. And then there's several offshoots, but 2 of the major ones were transmission to Kian Shotoku, who then taught Nagamine Shoshin, Nagasato Joen, and several others as we know. And then the other offshoot from Matsumura Kosaku generation was through Motobu Choki, Iha Kotatsu, and Kuba Koho. And that line came down through Kuba Shojin and Nakasone Seiyu. And Nakasone Seiyu, as it happens, used to live right across the street from here, literally in the location next to where the dojo bar used to be. So, quite useful historical references, I thought. It starts to paint a picture that maybe Wanshu is more than just a kata. If we then carry on, Motobuchoki sensei, in his book Watashi no Karate Jutsu, wrote, in Tomari, a unique system evolved, which, when compared to that of Shuri and Naha, employed a more pliable training syllabus. So what's implied here is that, or stated actually, is Wangji's legacy was a system of martial arts and not just a single kata. And that would make sense. He was already in his 60s when he arrived, was at the head of a very large group full of probably very skilled people. And he stayed for 5 years in Okinawa. Then there was plenty of time for him to transmit not just a single kata, but in fact a whole system of martial arts, and probably a lot more than that, you know, calligraphy, poetry, and many other things too. There are some indications that what he taught was white crane style Chinese martial arts as well. So Motobuchoki went on to note that kata handed down from the old Ryukyu system, old Ryukyu kingdom, includes Sanshin, Reishi, Seisan, Seiunchin, Pichurin, Chinto, Chinte, Wanshu, and Rohai, with Pasai, Naifanshi, and Kushanku being amongst the most popular. He noted that Sanshin, Useishi, Seisan, Seiunchin, and Pichurin are all from China. So basically, these are the ones we recognize today as being Nahate, you know, typically, usually seen in Goju-ryu. Well, what's interesting is that we received Useishi into Matsubayashiryu as well. So that's something to look at. But he continues, and apparently are still practiced only in Okinawa. Wanshu and Rohai were, until the establishment of Okinawa Prefecture in 1879, only ever practiced in Tomari, and virtually unknown in Shuri or Naha. Prior to Okinawa being established as an independent prefecture in 1879, Tomari had served as the second largest deep water port on the island. So often trading boats from both China and Korea were found washed ashore in Tomari. In fact, so often was it the case that local officials in Tomari were ordered by the king himself to erect special quarters for the victims of such incidents in an effort to accommodate them during their indefinite visit. And we know, for example, another famous arrivee in that manner was Anan, who was credited with the transmission of Chinto kata and Chinte and various other kata too. Right? It was largely because of this phenomenon that villagers befriended foreign bujin and ultimately established a local and highly eclectic method of karate. I don't think that there are too many people still around today who actually remember this portion of karate history in Tomari. So guys, feel free to turn your microphones on. I just thought I'd share that little bit of research into the history of the kata there, and the source of it being Wangji, the emissary who came over from China. One of the things that I found really interesting there was that, you know, there's an implication that Tomarite was significantly different from other systems that were being practiced in Shuri and Naha. Do you guys have any additional kind of insights or things that you've heard along the way that relate to sort of the history of Wanshu kata, Tomarite?
If I may, James, I think one of the first things listening to that and reading through that, one of the first things that I just comment on is or at least as I understood it, there's an implication that the Shuri district was really the royal district. And I know that we've spoken about this before, and I was kind of saying, well, if you're an ambassador there or an ambassador's bodyguard or whatever, and then you decide that you're going to go out for a beer on your night off, you're not going to wander all the way across to Tomari, which would be quite a distance to go. You're going to go to the most local place. And that always confused me, but this actually paints a slightly different picture, which sort of says, no, actually Tomari was maybe not a second capital, but it was a significant town or village or whatever it was at that time. So it paints a different picture of Okinawa than I had in my head through my own misinterpretation.
Indeed. And that's a really important point, is when we go and we visit Shuri Castle, for example, there's a building there that was designated as a residence for the visiting Chinese envoys, and it's right there in the heart of Shuri Castle. But so it will be interesting, and I haven't had opportunity to do this yet, to find out why, in this case, Wang Ji decided to, be resident in the Gusukuma house. Perhaps he was there by special invitation, but that certainly would be something to investigate further. Why he located himself in Tomari. It's an interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the history that you presented is quite interesting, and I'd be familiar with Nagamine Shoshu Sensei's short history within his book, but it's just a small comment that, and again, I think I may have said this before, is that as I understood it from Shinjo Sensei, Wanshu Kata and Wankan Kata are these sister kata of Tomari, of karate, or Tomari Te, which was, as I understood it, it was kind of a concept of taking these two kata together. And so when I actually heard that, and he went, that interested me first of all, but then he went on to explain about Shinto and Shinte being the same, and he had Rohai, and I'm going to mispronounce the name because I don't know it well enough, but it was like Rochin or Rochi, something like that. And these kata don't exist within Matsubayashiryu anymore. So I know it's a little bit off the topic of Wanshu, but I found it interesting that he would choose these sister kata, Wankan Wanshu, but then only choose one of the kata from the other couples. So it's just a note that I mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one thing that I noticed in the research here is that it seems that what Wang Ji transmitted either was a system of martial arts or had enough material that it was the basis for a system of martial arts. Perhaps the Gusukuma family were the first three generations were very important in perhaps transmitting into a system of practice among the local Tomari Bushi community. But yes, there are a number of kata that are attributed to the Tomari Te system, and most of those didn't make it into Matsubayashiryu. In fact, they didn't make it into many other systems on the island at all. Yeah, certainly stylistically, as you say, Dimitri, then Wanshu, Wankan, and Rohai do appear. Also, I think to some extent our version of Pasai as well, Tomari Pasai, Oya Domari Pasai or Tomari Pasai, also stylistically does feel like has a lot of commonalities. Tomari Te schools in Okinawa today are very rare. There is a teacher called Tokashiki Iken, who is now quite old, who runs a school which is Tomari Te transmitted from Nakasone Seiyu, who was I mentioned earlier in the lineage there, and also Gojuru. It's a mix of Tomari Te and Gojuru. But there are very, very few remaining kind of Tomari Te schools as such. So yeah, it's kind of a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but it does help, I think, for us to see that what we have is a piece perhaps of a larger system. One of the other things that struck me, and this is again is something that I think we won't pursue here, but it might be something to go off and have a look at, is the idea about the historical context. So when the envoy and his group were arriving, they would be obviously a fully equipped militarily guarded group. The Saposhi came with guards, with military retinue. And of course, their primary martial arts would have been weapons-based martial arts. The empty-handed martial arts, civil defense martial arts, where hopefully, you don't have to be dressed up like a warrior in order to get through. That came much later, right? So it might be interesting line of research to also think about the origins of Wanshu Kata, for example, in a time when the default method of fighting was with weapons rather than empty-handed. It seems to me maybe that some of the dynamics that we have in our empty-handed kata today may have originated in kata that were actually weapons-based. So that might be an interesting line of research to pursue.
It would be very interesting to. Yeah, it would be very interesting to look at that. But and I don't have any historical evidence to say this, I don't have anything to back this up, bar my own opinion, and as a very opinionated person, that it comes naturally to me to start waffling like this. But I would say that if you're on an ambassadorial mission, the idea of subduing a potential assailant and spoiling an assassination attempt through subduing them is preferable to taking their head off with a sword or a naginata or something like that. So even though the weapons-based systems would be important, and I do agree with that, absolutely, and would be probably more common through a national defense idea or for a national defense idea, the idea of policing is actually really important, I think, to consider. And the idea of you're not able to arrest a dead person. So you have to try to keep this person alive, particularly if you're going to look at a larger plot of assassination, because a plot of assassination doesn't happen through one person in isolation, generally speaking. You can have lone assailants, but generally speaking. So the idea of control, restraint, the idea of empty hand striking, grappling doesn't seem to be that alien to me, or doesn't seem to be that far removed from the work of security. Now, I appreciate that the policing tactics of 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, or technical police work wasn't maybe as advanced, certainly wasn't as advanced as it is now. But when we were looking at Funakoshi Gishin Sensei, he wrote a story in Karate Do My Way of Life, I think it was. And he was talking about assisting some police officers in arresting somebody. So certainly there was a legal system, a judicial system that was there, and they weren't interested in just cutting down people left and right. They had a very proper procedure in place to do that. And so I would expect that, as with now, the people charged with that responsibility, village elders, local police people or whatever, that they would be, yes, trained with the baton, trained with the sai or whatever, but they'd also have their own empty hand control and restraint stuff. And I would say that that would become even more important if you look at when presidents or ambassadors move around with security. The president of the US is probably the one that people will be most familiar with seeing. You don't see the president's guard with Kalashnikovs. You know, they're dressed in a suit, they've got their earpiece, and they're more than likely armed, but concealed. And they're more than likely more than proficient in taking an assailant down empty-handed as well. So I think it would be an important consideration.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very, very important context. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on the historical context, or any other points to throw in there? Okay, cool. Right. Well, we're pretty much on track. It was nice to take a look at the history. I always find looking at history is useful if it helps to inform you about your practice. But it's always best to spend more time on practice than looking at the history. So on that note, let's start and do a bit of practice. Guido Sensei, would it be okay to ask you to lead us through a little bit of a warm-up, and maybe the first kind of slow walkthrough of the kata performance?
Yes, I can do. So,
I'm going to spotlight you.
okay, I hope you all can understand me. And yeah, I think so. Short break. Right, Kitsuki. Takani, right. Short, warming up, jumping a little bit. Legs outside. Forward. Diagonal. on the place. Okay. Squats, but not so deep. Heels up and slow down. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Now a little bit deeper. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay, hands up, 45 degrees, and lift the feet. Ich, left side, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. To the front, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. To the side, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Sidewise, start with the left hand, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Down and up, forward, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay, diagonal, right hand to left feet and the other one. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay, a little more deeper, and one leg bend and one leg. It's change. Change. Last one. And now the toes looks up to the change. Change. Last one, change. Get up and senketsu. Deep stance. Body straight. The heel is coming up, and now the hip is going downwards. Change to the other side, senketsu. Heel up, and hip goes down. Okay, coming up. Check out your legs, rotating your hips, left and right side. Hip, not hips. Rolling your arms forward, back. Against. Other side. Okay. Open your finger and close. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. San, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. San, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay. Relaxed. Get one foot. Rolling. Ich, ni, san, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Other side, ich, ni, san, chi, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. The other foot, ich, ni, san, chi, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Other side, ich, ni, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay. The head, left and right. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Up and down. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Circle, one to the left, then to the right, change every time. Ich, change. Ni, change. San, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Okay, 2 fingers on the side. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. To the other side. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu. Massage with shopping a little bit left and right. And also with the open hand, both sides. Okay, a little bit shaking out your body to relax the muscles. Okay, let's start the kata slowly. I think everybody is familiar with it, so we go slow through the kata. Yoi. Ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock, chich, hach, ku, chu, ich, ni, san, chi, go, rock. So if you change to see what you're doing. Okay, that's better. Start again. Or is there a question between? No? Okay. Yo. Ich. Ni. San. Chi. Go. Rock. Chich. Hach. Ku. Chu. Ich. Ni. San. Chi. Go. Rock. Chich. Hach. Ku. Chu. Ich. Ni. San. Chi. Go. And relaxed. Okay. I think 2 times we make by yourself. I say Hachime, and you do the full kata by yourself. And I take a look. Okay. Yo. Hachime. Okay. Now may relax, breathe a little bit, and then last time by yourself. Yo. Hachime. Okay. Will we split the kata in parts? Starting part, the difference between different sensei, how they do it. Perhaps it's interesting. Will we do it now together?
Well, Guido, Sensei Ano, when you're teaching the kata, performing the kata, what are some of the sort of main points of the kata performance that you look for and that you try and get people to do correctly?
Okay. So in the starting sequence, there are some difference from teacher to teacher. So some only lift the leg. Some lift and go outside. And some do with a spin in the hip. So we can try all these three things to look different. What is the difference? And how it feels. Yeah. For me, it's my most important thing is that's inside, not over my knee, because when I do this, my technique will be weak. Yeah. I bend my hip forward and kick, so I give more power in the technique. Okay. Next part could be from here. Some teachers go down and then open the hand and punch. Other teachers make this, open, and then punch. Okay. So my version is kick and punch. And from this point, some people go like in Chindo, with 4 feet, goes to the left and step up. Yeah. Because of this, you can go straight up and rotate, and you'll be in the direct position of things. You don't have to change the position of your back feet, and you can turn your feet directly, and it's easier to come high, and there's no much weight on your knees when you drill your feet. Okay, it's easier to come up. You can try it. Do it some 3 or 4 times to see the difference. Okay. Also, I've seen, perhaps you can better see it from this side. When I go down, my right leg goes over the foreleg. Perhaps you can see it better this way. Okay. So I can get up and be directly in single without shifting my hip. Okay. Right. So several versions of this I've seen. This is clear, I think so. Sometimes I see there's a big movement of your hand, and then you go forward. Yeah, but Sensei Ayaki taught me to make it small. Yeah? To make a small open hand, not a big rotation. Yeah? Small, and then you go forward. When you do this motion of walking, I do, instead of the hand, my body goes forward. It's one motion. Grab and fall inside. Yes? Open and move the body is one motion. Try it. if you like. Okay, so I can't see better here. Yes. Some people do it in 2 times. One time is open, second time is walking. I do it, and I learned it. Do it in one motion. Yes, directly. When I punch, in one motion. Try to understand the difference. Yes. Because I like to shorten the time between grabbing and punching. When I do it 1, 2, it's a long time. When I do 1, it's easier, yeah, and it's faster, and the opponent can't react really fast, yeah. So this was my and the most different, or 3 difference of the high open hand is the moving of the feet. Yeah, some, I hope you can see it. Yes, I think some do it. The front leg goes back and open. Some do it. The back leg goes forward and open. And the third version is both legs go forward. Yeah. It's a thing of interpretation, I think so. It's when the attack comes, I go back and react, or I go directly inside and react. So I think that's a difference of interpretation and also of the thinking of the senses. It's my opinion. Yeah.
Yes.
And the last one, from this position, back and punch with the open palm. Sometimes I see it's only from here straight, or go back and makes more and gives you more power in this technique and go inside. Also, the third version is combinating with the upper arm. I go and push both arms. Yes. These 3 versions I've seen and I've made. So there are differences between different teachers.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you.
So that's my hints, what I can say to the kata, what I was looking for. So if you have question or something else, please do it.
Okay. What I'd like to suggest actually is perhaps we could hand over to Martin Sensei now. You've given us, that's fantastic. You've given us a lot to think about there. If we hand over to Martin Sensei, if that's okay with him, maybe he can lead us through a couple more repetitions of the kata and then add any other additional points that he has.
Yeah, that's no problem. Thank you very much, Guido, for that. Because I've seen some of those before, but also there's some of those that are very new to me. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. Okay. So maybe we'll take the kata 3 times. One time again slowly, one time maybe 50% of your speed and power, and one time as good as we can for today. So.
Okay. Can I just check that? Here we go. I just want to spotlight you for everybody. Here we go.
Oh yeah, sure.
There we go. Done it. Okay, great.
Okay. So, one questions. So, Tetsuki. Hey, onegaishimasu. Wanshu. Yoi. Haji. And now they, okay, arigatou gozaimasu. So I think everybody is finished, and we go again and just raise the intensity a little bit more. So, Tetsuki, Wanshu, Yoi, Haji. Okay, and I think everybody is again finished. So one last time, and let's do our best. Speed, power, etc. And then after this, I'll take a few minutes to catch my breath. So, Wanshu, Yoi, Haji. Arigatou gozaimasu. Okay, so again, I think most people are finished, and I'm talking as trying to recover my breath, so I apologize. As I've already expressed to Guido, he's already presented a lot of the variants that I would have seen, plus some others that I wouldn't have seen. So there's 2 points I want to make on one particular section, which is the turning around section. And there's 2 main methods, I suppose, that I've seen at this point here. The first one is to just lift. So there's no action back here, essentially. It's a direct push from here to come up. And while the other option then, which I feel is an easier option, the stance essentially changes from Zenkutsu to Jigotai by turning the heel in. And then that of course shifts your body weight more into the center. And then it makes that lift a little bit easier to perform. So much like when Guido was doing it, perhaps people would like to have a little experimentation. So you're trying to not shoot on the first option, not move this back leg, just just push up. And on the second option, to turn in the back heel and then lift up. And it's just so that you can explore it for your own body and see what's more comfortable for you.
Martin, say one question, may I?
Yeah, of course. I'm just trying to find you because I'm spotlight, so I can't see you. Just one second now. Where are we?
In Netherlands.
Where are we? Oh yeah, no, I'm flicking through the screens, Dimitri. Sorry, go ahead.
So how do we interpret this move? What is the interpretation of this move? Please, thank you.
No problem. Because that's a separate section of today's session, Dimitri, if you don't mind, I might hold off on that, because if I give an opinion, it might negatively influence the others' opinions as well. So, sorry. Yeah. No problem. Okay. So, the second thing that I might just comment, it's more of a comment, but again, it's from Shinjo Sensei. Shinjo Sensei said to me that, and a very apt year for it, that Nagamine Shoshin Sensei always emphasized the Olympic motto was, and you'll get it right and I'll get it wrong, like faster, stronger, higher, but that kata performance should be faster, stronger, and more beautiful. And that this was the advice from Nagamine Shoshin Sensei. So sometimes when I see this movement performed, it's with great intention, but it's without the beauty that we can all appreciate, the aesthetic side of the kata that we can all appreciate. So, as I understood it from Shinjo Sensei, the arms should go straight up, and I think you can see that on the camera. So my arms are straight and close into my body, my fingers are together, and the wrist line is straight. So it's a very neat movement, neat as in a tidy movement, and I don't just flop my arms up and move on, because that's not making the kata a beautiful study. So again, as I understood it from Shinjo Sensei, Nagamine Shoshin Sensei said, it should be faster, that we strive to be faster, stronger, and more beautiful in our performance. Okay, so, and I find that a little difficult sometimes because I'm very much an oaf in that sense. But to push up, to step with control and to spin. I see Lynn Donnelly is on there and she'll talk to you about ballet. To spin narrowly, protect yourself all the time, and then to be able to land with some kind of impact. Sometimes I see performances from some people this kind of way, they're rushing to here, and they leave out that movement. It's like mumbling your words and you forget it. So anyway, I think everybody else, or everything else, sorry, I think Guido has already covered. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin Sensei. That's fantastic. Let me just remove the spotlight here. We are exactly 1 hour in to our event here. So why don't we take a very short water break at this point? Let's take a break for just 2 minutes, grab some water, towel off, and then we'll come back. I just have a couple of points to add that Arakaki Sensei usually stresses to me when we're doing this kata. Let's do that after we have a water break. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, kiddos. Okay, everybody, hopefully we've had a break. We can pick up where we left off. Okay, what I'd like to do is, again, we'll just run the kata a couple of times. I will say that Guido Sensei and Martin Sensei are obviously much better kata technicians than myself, so I'm going to apologize in advance. But I just remembered a couple things that Arakaki Sensei fairly consistently stresses to me when we're doing this kata. So I thought I'd throw them in as well. But let's get back into the groove by running through the kata one more time. So everybody's ready. Thank you, it's good. Right, Wanshu. Yoi. 2、3、4、5、6、7、8、9、はい、10、11、はい、半、はい、はい、はい、はい、はい、はい、はい、はい、はい。Hey. Okay, we're going to run it one more time. Hey. Hey, it's good. Wanshu, right? It's. Hey. Some. She. Oh. Look. It's. That's. Two. Wait. Hey. Two. It's. Hey. Wait. 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 Vale. Wait. So one thing that Akari Sensei stresses is kind of a smooth transition across from the first down position. So you've gone down to here. So rather than coming up and across, from here, moving mostly laterally. So not going up and coming back down. So from this position here, you have an upright position, so not stooped over. But from here, you're kind of sliding back across this way. From here. So your stance remains fairly low when you transition from one to the next. So should we just practice that piece? It can be a little bit tough on the knees and the hips, but once you're down there, here, trying to just move laterally, explosively. Okay. And again. Moving laterally. And then obviously continuing on. So that's one point that always stands out to me. The second one is in that movement where we're moving from here and then moving forward, sliding in using the rotational movement. Like Guido Sensei said, that's sort of one dynamic movement, one continuous movement. So not twisting and then stepping, but it all happening together. And Arkaki Sensei often stresses the kind of the dynamic nature of that. You should be really shifting and moving when you're doing that. So there's this potential of a lot of movement and force within that movement. So if we go from here, then the next movement, you should be able to, if you want to cover a lot of ground. Now in the kata, of course, you want to keep that measured, but your ability to kind of really dynamically move very, very quickly with that movement. If you look at it from the side, how far, obviously when we do performance kata, it's kind of stressed that we should end up in the same place that we started, which is for performance purposes. But within that, there can be certain parts which can be very, very dynamic, I think. So, you know, how far can you move and control and have that power and dynamic power? And this is a particular phase of the kata where often, you know, we'll think about that. So you can practice that in terms of always moving consistently the same distance, or sometimes being able to move further or faster, for example. So just practice a couple on your own. And as Guido Sensei said, kind of that twisting movement is not a big windmill kind of movement. Arakaki Sensei usually talks about thinking about you've got hold of somebody's gi and you're twisting that gi. So clearly you're not going to be moving it all over the place. You've got a hold of them and you're twisting within a fairly small arc. And I guess the last point, very much along the lines that Martin Sensei stressed, was kind of the energy, the up energy in that last turn. So again, Arakaki Sensei usually stresses seeing a lot of dynamic up energy in that turn, and then the control coming out. So it was very interesting. Martin Sensei was going down to detail saying, do you do that from this stance as it is, or do you shift so that you've got a stance like this and then go? And I can say I can see either working. That will be an interesting thing for me to work on and think about too. But the idea that from here, you really want to thrust up, yeah. So not kind of halfway, but really everything up, yeah, like a dynamic full body movement. Right? So here. Yeah. It's a good job that we have higher ceilings here. There's the space to do this. But you can practice that. Just really try to make the whole, coordinate the whole body in that movement. That movement up. Okay. So that's been extremely useful. Thank you to Guido Sensei, Martin Sensei. Of course, you know, because we all share the same instructors, you know, we should hopefully converge mostly on our way of doing things. But even so, even within that, there's some really, really interesting insights and variances. Wonder if we could just remove the spotlight here. So let's move on to thinking about trying to examine the principles of the kata. And when I say principles, I'm thinking about the word bunkai, but before we go to applications, the principles of the kata, the principles of movement, stances, strategy even. I'll kick off. So one observation I have is that the kata uses obviously a lot of rotational force and power. Power generation is what we kind of understand almost as the key characteristic of Tomari, perhaps. This would be something for you guys to chip in and debate, which is this, using the central core, the hips, loose hips, and powering from relatively, and on the kata sometimes we go to a slightly extended stance, but actually it's a relatively short stance, right, which allows the hips to move quite freely, and then the way that we generate that generates a lot of whipping force, right? We have this. Yeah. So for me, one real characteristic of the kata is this very, very strong use of the hips. use that kind of whipping force. Guido Sensei, Martin Sensei, what are your observations about the principles of the kata?
I think in this kata, there's a principle which goes high and low. So you have techniques, it goes down and up, and you see here it goes down and up, and it's showing perhaps that you bring the person out of balance and confuse the body of the opponent with this up and down. So this is my opinion of this kata. And also you have it in row high also, you go down and up and down, and you see you confuse your opponent with these things. And if you touch, for example, you punch deep and your body goes down, and then it goes up and down, so it's easier to win the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's my opinion.
I absolutely agree with your observation there. The high-low strategy is throughout the whole kata. We have lots of strategies which are looking to provide usually sort of a high distraction followed by a low attack, or vice versa. So yeah, definitely see that in kata.
So for myself, James, if I was to say, I would think that your angle relative to the other person is something quite important, and 45 degrees being, particularly on these movements, that 45-degree angle relative to the person is heavily featured. So as I've understood it, there's a 45-degree step here, which is quite obvious, but there's this, I would consider there to be a slightly more subtle 45-degree step just here, which angles me off the opponent. So I'm moving away from their attack, but I'm remaining close to the attacker. So I think that's an important principle within this one.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, isn't it? When we look at the kata Embusen, unlike Pinan katas, it doesn't really have a very pronounced, 45-degree Embusen, right? You're usually working left and right, forwards and backwards, etc., etc. However, as you say, in the transition from one position to another, then you go through that 45 degrees relative to the attacker, to the opponent. So the angular movement seems to be more implicit to the kata. Perhaps Pinan kata, maybe it was just my naive kind of observation, but maybe the Pinan kata, had to spell it out more. You should be at 45 degrees. You should be at 45 degrees. Whereas I think maybe Wanshu is the movement's more subtle and more implied or implicit to the kata. So, sorry, Martin says it.
Well, certainly, I was going to say one of the other ones that I would think about is this common Tomari limb entanglement. If I say limb entanglement, because I don't, if I say arm, I'll probably think of another one that has the leg in it. But this limb entanglement idea that you see with the machite, particularly, I think that's a unique feature and a common feature across the Tomari kata that we have within Matsubayashiryu.
I absolutely agree. I'm really glad that you brought that one out. Yes. Nakasone Seiyu Sensei, who I mentioned earlier as being one of the latter kind of recipients of the Tomari lineage, almost sort of, in some ways, he received more than most. He was famous for his limb entanglement techniques. He didn't become a very famous teacher overall because he was sort of from a lower class. He wasn't that well educated, and he had a speech impediment. He stuttered, and for those reasons, he didn't get out in front of people too much. but he was famous within the circles that knew for limb entanglement. And there's actually some really nice pictures, photographs of him doing that and really tying up an opponent. It looks like jiu-jitsu. You know, he's got them so tied up and so mobilized. So clearly, and apparently he created his own kata, rinkan, supposedly it was called, which was distinctive to that aspect of Tomari as well. Although I haven't seen the kata, I've heard about it. It's sort of been lost. Maybe there are one or two people who know it now, but not many. But yeah, yeah. So in Okinawan language, limb entanglement is karamidi. Karamidi. Karamu means to entangle, and di is hand, te. Yeah. So karamidi is a really, I think really important aspect of Tomari te kata, and actually probably the one which bears the most investigation because it's the least, perhaps the least well known. So yeah, that would definitely be a very interesting aspect to to continue and look at. Okay, thank you so much. So the summary then, the principal application, look at the principles. Let's take a look at some of the kind of go-to applications then that we teach based on the movements and principles in this Wankan kata, Wanshu kata. My apologies, Wanshu kata. If it's okay, I have my assistant here, so if it's okay, I'll kick off, and then we'll maybe just hand the baton round and see how we go, if that's okay with everybody. So kata begins like this, right? And often this is talked about as a sort of a salutation. It looks somewhat like the sort of salutation that you often see in mainland Chinese martial arts, for example. But I think this is the beginning of the kata. The kata has already started here, and based on that, and one common application when you have one hand placed on top of another, and we see it in other kata too, right? Another kata too is that this hand is starting to take control of the opponent's hand. So this represents the opponent's hand, and this one's starting to take control. So based on that, for example, a common attack is that you're grabbed with one hand and then punch with the other. Okay, left, right, or right, left. So the beginning of this kata, the opening of this kata, has a really nice application there, which is relatively simple, but actually works pretty well on both sides, I find. So you come in, person comes in and grabs you. Yeah. So we'll just do the grab to start with. Yeah, so come in and grab. Okay. The kata position is like this, right? Here, okay, and then I twist and drop down and strike. And the kick is in here as well. So from here, the kick comes through first, distracts down or takes out the base. If your timing is good enough and they step forward as they grab, it's possible that you could take the leg and sweep out, but it's kind of difficult to do. So this kick is more likely to be maybe just like jamming or distracting them down, because if they're not distracted away from the grip, it's going to be difficult to break it. Right? So say they grip, distract, yeah, and then from here, roll down, and drive down. And if the drive down goes through their face, that's fine, and could be drive down through the arm. From here, when they go down and hit the ground, there's likely to be a bounce, right? And if your timing is good, you can use the bounce to combine pulling and hitting. And so pulling, you've still got pressure on their wrist, you've still got a wrist lock on here, pulling and hitting down. If they're starting to get back up by themselves, of course, that's even more effective. The great thing I like about this application is it appears to work relatively well both left and right side. So you're not quite sure whether they're going to grab you with their left or their right, but it doesn't really matter because you can use the same movement on the same side to deal with either. So now if he grabs me with the other side, here, my movement remains the same. Hand on top, roll, yeah, kick, down, through. Yeah. In fact, it's even more devastating for him when I get the back of his arm here, right? Through here, and then there's a follow-on application for the turn there, but we'll just go through this one. The one thing I would add to that is, of course, if he's grabbed you, he's going to try and punch you, right? So the timing of that's going to be fast. Okay, so while your resting hand is coming onto the grab, yeah, the other hand punch needs to be guarding. Yeah, so in the kata, the two hands are nice and tidy here, and up and down. Yeah, in reality, when someone's got hold of you, you index that, but be ready for the other hand coming through. So these two hands need to work together. But from here, then you can continue the circle. You can see the circular movement here. Yeah. Take out the base and continue the circular movement. Yeah. So that's kind of the go-to that I teach for that first section, the kata. How about you guys? Similar, different? What's your approach to that first section of the kata?
So I have similar things. If you grab and immediately you go inside and pull, kick and bring down and punch. So you have this motion. Yeah. Bring inside. The fist comes and down. Okay, when he lays on the ground, but I can't throw him because it's a stone ground, so I have to be careful with my son. Yeah. Or perhaps not. So this version is a little similar to your version, and also I have a similar version when he grips my arms, and I go in this position. I go, perhaps you can go a little bit. Yeah, I go up and go here and bring him into this position. You see, bringing up, kick inside and bring him down. That's another version of this to simulate this movement. Yeah, my mind first. We have this movement here to bring it up to the side, inside kick. His leg goes up and you go down here to have it here. Yeah, that was a second. I have some more. If you like, I can do it. You can grip me with both hands. Yeah, so we can go the same movement inside and straight to this, bringing out of balance, kick, and bringing down. This is similar to the one with one arm.
Yeah.
Yeah? And also, yeah, you can practice if you like. If you like, you're only looking. Perhaps you can practice a little bit, trying to do it. Every movement.
Let's, Martin Sensei, do you have anything to add to this particular section?
Yeah, I'd just say really quickly, we will cover some similar things, and I have seen some similar things to what you've already shown from the various teachers, but maybe one that's a little bit more unique. It comes from the idea, when I was involved in security work, I used to see people charging in towards each other, and the common response of somebody charging towards them was for people to put their hands out, which naturally resulted in a kind of a poorly executed clinch style position. And so coming from that kind of position where Lorraine is grabbing me and I'm grabbing against her, it's just to pull the head down, have a little bit of a wrestle with each other. And when I find her, just step around, when I find her off balance to the appropriate side, just to make nearly like Hizaguruma, and then drop. Now I can't drop the rein down, but rather than this being a punch, then that just becomes a pressure of taking the opponent down. So it's just a little bit closer of a grip than what you guys have already expressed. Sorry. I think the rest of it is very similar.
Yeah.
That's great. From a clinch position, that makes a lot of sense. Really, really good. Okay, so yeah, so why don't we all just, if you have a partner with you, let's just take 1 minute, just practice one or two of those strategies that you've just seen. I'm going to try the hook. I'm going to try that clinch position. Let's take just a minute or two to practice that section, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Was ja nochmal. Geht es den Greifen nochmal? Greifen so. Die Greifen. Ich gehe direkt hier rein. Ich versuche dann wieder reinzubringen und runter zu werfen. Also von Clinch-Situation. Das heißt, die Greifen nicht. Ich bringe ihn down, ja, hier rein, weg. Ja, das ist halt auch dann inside. So, ist so ähnlich wie das Greifen hier auch. Bitte?
Okay, wonderful. All right, there's some fantastic material there. In the interest of time, we're gonna press on, kind of through the kata. So next section, the kata. From here we stand up, we go into Geida Barai here, and then down into sort of the what Nagamine Sensei said was a characteristic kind of part of the kata, which is kakushi ski. So this kind of hidden punch. Very distinctive, kind of interesting to try and look at the applications of it. As an exercise, yeah, here, often we'll try and just work on isolating that exercise. But one of the applications that I think works quite well is against being grabbed with two hands. You grab with two hands. So basically going through a geidan barai and a rising hit. So from here, hand comes up, yeah, and then drops forward into geidan barai. I'm just going to break the stance, and then comes from a strike. Okay, one more time. So he grabs, yeah, hand's going to come up. This is the entry, yeah, to geidan barai. Then down through the crease of the elbow here. We want to keep that movement going and dropping down into geidan barai. This is going to open up his side here, yeah, to get just strikes into the ribs, into the side of the body. Yeah. If he's come down a lot, then striking into the side of the head. So this kind of entry to here, cutting through, and then the dropping energy we get down. But obviously this is not a good fighting stance. But I think what we've got here is the use of dynamic whipping force, and that's like a connected movement, right? So when it come in and grab, this kind of movement, right? time. And then the energy is coming in here. And I've got control very much as we saw in the first sequence of Karamidi. This is a nice one because it shows kind of principles of entrapping the arms, right? Yeah. I want to entrap both arms if I can, yeah, and then bring him into my strike. I think there's a sort of a continuous sequence there, possibly. We've done one, right? One strike, and then you can go in underneath the other and wrap up even more. This is difficult for him to get out of. Difficult for him to get out of. And from here, strike, hit, pull down. There's a lot like to do. So just that second, I'm basically doing this. Yeah. Basically doing this. First one, striking, yeah. But then this one I can bring underneath and trap. Now I'm going to move into my second Gidan-Barai movement, which puts on the pressure, and then I can use my hit or push, or hit down, or slap, any of those movements. Okay, hand the baton over. What do you guys think about that next sequence in the kata?
Okay. I have one. The grip diagonal. From here, Gidan-Barai, and the same what you say, the rotation one. Okay. You can block, and then you can go through like in Yakusuku Committee number 1.
Yes.
Yes. So, but you have 4 and straighter. It's the same what you say to get more energy in the punch. Get it right. Yeah. It's most similar to your version.
Yes. Martin, something.
Yeah, and I think mine is going to be more or less a mixture of the two of those. So in my thinking, if Lorraine is grasping with 2 hands, she's probably going to be coming with either a headbutt or a knee, so I don't know which of them. So I want to drop down, you hold this one strong. So she's going to hold this one extra strong for me because I'm a little bit of a bully here in this one. So I want to be mindful of that headbutt, and I also want to be mindful of that knee. And so I'm making Zenkutsu, but I haven't broken this grip yet. So my sensation is of pulling and then coming back. And at this distance, I would have a preference to the forearm, but depending on the distance, it may be okay to hit with the knuckle or with the elbow, just kind of depending on. So I'm sinking, I'm covering, and I'm trying to remove as many of the optimum targets for her as is possible. And for me, that's the groin and the head. I'm failing in this one, which is absolutely fine for me. If I do happen to push it off, that's fine. I can come back and punch. But in this case, I'm choosing to fail in breaking this grip. So I'm going to add that extra strip with the rotation of my body. Okay. And then come back. Sort of across the head, at that distance with the forearm across the head. But depending on where they are, you can certainly punch, as I said, or elbow.
Yeah, that would be absolutely devastating. Yeah, very nice combination. Okay, again, should we just take a minute or two to maybe select 1 or 2 of those that we've seen and practice ourselves? Let's take, just a couple of minutes, just practice that sequence that we've just seen, those different alternatives. Martin Hi, okay. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of practice in there. Okay, so going back to the kata, we've kind of got as far as using this one. And we have this circular type movement and sliding in, so the circular rotational and sliding in lateral movement. And we are moving off center as well, so we're moving off slightly off of the line, right? Arakaki Sensei usually teaches this as a grab. You're capitalizing on, you've managed to grab their gi. You may have entangled their arm as well, and you're moving in to essentially do kind of a sliding uppercut. So they've come in to punch, covered it, grabbed the gi, maybe got underneath, and then come in behind to hit. Yeah, so just from an angle, punch is coming in, cover that punch, got a bit of gi, I'm going to drive in and hit through. So that's one application. But in the entry is that you have to go in order to get to a range that you can grab them. If you are just staying away out of range, it's harder to grab. Possible, but harder, right? Whereas if you have gone in, yeah, uke, but not run away, then you're bang on the body and in range to grab. And you're going to grab whatever you're going to grab, right? But ideally, you will have pushed them across to their center, grabbed gi, and moved in to strike. Here now, his arm's down, so I can't really get to his stomach, right? But his head's nice exposed, so it would make sense to hit him in the head, right? That was exposed. Another variation is that he's come in with 1, 2, 2, yeah, 1, 2, 1, 2, okay, and here I'm rotating in here and then stepping through and striking, and from there I can then go into a throw. So one more time, he's thrown a 1, 2 at me, yeah, 1, 2, I'm on the inside, but immediately rotate that arm and bring it in. I use my body rotation, so rather than just trying to use my arm, I use my body. Here, yeah. So it's a slightly bigger movement, but it's just that's in reaction to the fact that I'd have to enter from a uke, kind of Joden uke type position, right? The punch coming in, 1, 2, here, roll in, strike, and then from there I pull back the other way, right? If I pull him, put him down to the ground. I put the kick in there. Once we've done this one, 1, 2, there's this, and throwing the energy down to the ground, right? So that could be the follow-on, essentially taking out his base and throwing him down to the ground. Okay, and the button over to you, Guido Sensei.
We can do it when we only do this movement, he can punch straight into it. Yeah, directly. Perhaps you can show it. Can go straight into out of the direction of his attacking. Direct inside, and now from here kick and open from here. And if you have the next movement together, this one, you can bring it up and have fun. Yeah. So slowly inside, kick, open, and now you make this movement, go up and have fun. Yeah.
Fantastic.
This is my version of this declaration.
Yeah, lovely. Fantastic. Thank
So
you.
it had to be looks nice and brutal.
I think your interpretation of fun and my interpretation of fun are different. Again, I would think that we're going to be following along similar lines, but if I can take it from a left arm grasp, just to vary it slightly, and I'm going to use my arm to go around, and as I'm coming around, I'm stepping off the line, and I'm getting down at the same time. So I'm going to go like a pressing throw, like a fold. So I'm going to show it on the other side. It's done on the right hand side of the kata against it in my current analysis of it with a left hand grip. But just for the camera to see, maybe it's better when she's grasped here. So I'm coming inside. I'm pushing over and around. So this is my uplift, and I can hit that to the back. If that gets in the way, I can hit to the back and it's still fine. If I miss the body, I can come up against the elbow. Either one is fine. And then as my body weight goes forward, I am choosing to use a shote ate here. I can use a punch. I'm sure it'll be fine. But it's my body weight moving off, or my body weight moving forward, that creates a scissors kind of a motion to make the takedown. And then it's I would consider it to be quite a severe takedown, because you've strongly exposed the back of the skull to the ground, which is quite dangerous. And then by extension of saying that, if you're practicing in a space like Guido is, or like I am, where there's no protection, please do take care of your partner if you decide to drop them on their head. So, thank you.
Like you say, fun, right? What this kata clearly has potential very, very dangerous applications in it. So we should always take appropriate care. But should we just take a couple of minutes to practice a couple of those techniques that we just saw there? Yeah, let's just take 2 minutes practice, and we'll come back and go on to the next section. Right. Okay, hi. So, just in the interest of time, we'll just move on. Okay. So we got through the sequence where we've gone here, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we're coming now to the sequence here, this one, and here. Okay. I mean, this is very, very similar, of course, to the same kind of sequences we see in one hand kata. These kind of entries, and then strike. So, in terms of wrapping up, one thing to note is that I've noticed is that, of course, Matsubayashiryu is not the only style to have one kan and one shu kata, for example. Other schools do too, and there are variances. When it comes to one shu kata, for example, one variance is that here there's a kick that goes out when the knee has been raised. So here there's a kick that goes out here, and sometimes instead of a palm hand, it's a sideways strike, for example. As we talked about earlier on, the principle of attacking high and then destroying low, or destroying low and attacking high, is a very sound principle, and it kind of goes through this kata, I believe. So attacks coming in here, 1, 2, yeah, and coming up through the middle here. So in the kata, we come around the side. So if we're coming around the side, then we could do it like this. Yeah. But if we find ourselves inside the strike, 1, 2, then sometimes coming up through the middle is also an option. And then from there, knee, kick through, and strike. Okay. So we have a couple of alternatives there. If you find yourself in a relatively safer position of being able to get to the outside of the strike, then you can go on the outside and use the fingers. I think one of the reasons that it's an open-handed technique as opposed to a closed-handed technique is that you have the option to use the fingers to go into the eyes. If you're going around the outside, it kind of feels like you need to do that because you've got to reach further. If you end up on the outside, then you need to be able to reach further. One strategy for doing that is to use this hand to pull this one down, so you make a space to go through. But still, good idea to use the fingers there. Rake across the eyes or poke into the eyes. Either way, you get the same result. So on the outside, here, the knee comes up. I'm going to imply that there's a kick there, yeah, and then strike in with the palm. Yeah, gather in and strike with the palm. But like I say, if you find yourself on the inside of the guard, then the entry for this hand has to be different because you can't go around the outside. So find yourself on the inside here, and you're going to come up through the middle. Come up through the middle, poke, push, stab, and then kick what's available to you. Generally the leg is going to be in front, or the groin, and then in with palm strike. Yeah, so either outside, or if you find yourself on the inside there, guard, slot up through, kick, and then strike into the center. Okay. And Guido Sensei.
Okay. We start with the open hand. The first movement is an inside, outside kick, bring back, and with the open hand, wait, with open hand inside here. Okay, do it again, slowly, inside, outside, kick, bring him down, and punch with the open palm inside. Only slight shot. If he only want one punch, we go straight to the head and immediately into the back or the front leg, whatever, and bring him down and punch him to the head or to the throat on the side. Yeah, that's what I told before. You can move back or you can move forward. Yeah, it's an interpretation thing. When I move forward, I get the arm with lower energy. When I go back, the energy will be bigger, bigger, and bigger, and I need more energy to block him. So I go inside straight to his muscle, straight to his biceps, and you see when I punch a little bit on it, his arm will go back. When I punch with a full power, and his body will go immediately to the back. And when you will do two punches, the punch will be not so strong in the situation. So I can kick, directly grab and punch. Okay? That's my version.
Really, really nice.
Okay, so thank you both. So in my analysis of this technique, I feel that the transition step, the tension step, is an important one. So in this case, Lorraine is going to make an overhand blow at me. Make a punch. Yeah, just kind of do that. And that initial step is the key. To my mind, that initial step is the key to making the rest of it work. So that when the blow comes in, I move and then come back across her and bring her down. So it's body crashing, I suppose, is the way to do it. But that the transition step, which I used to do the transition step coming forward, but Guido Sensei told me one day that I should go at an angle. So I'm avoiding something that's coming in the central funnel of attacks, as opposed to the horizontal kind of a blow. So just put the hand out. So the transition step should move my head offline, and then I come back. So that's how I understand it at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Taking off the body line, bring back in. And actually, it's interesting you talk about body crashing. In karate, we sort of lost body crashing techniques. I mean, Goju-ryu retains some sort of shoulder barging type techniques, but I think it'd be fair to say that shurite, modern shurite, maybe doesn't really retain any kind of body slamming techniques or body shoving techniques, barging techniques, but they're very likely to have been a part of the original repertoire because they've certainly come through in traditional Chinese martial arts. The little that I've seen, for example, if I look at praying mantis, there are lots of techniques where you're using the body slamming either forwards, laterally, or in circular movement. So I think that this is a very, very valuable and important part of our toolkit, even though we don't really think about it too much now, but it should be there, along with things like headbutting, right? That should be part of our valid toolkit too. We don't do it because, you know, it was ruled out of competition, modern competition rules, kind of ruled out of, you know, beautiful karate, if you want to put it that way, I suppose. But it definitely should be there in our toolkit. It's certainly there in our thinking about bunkai and the applications in Koyo Waza. So I'm really glad that you brought that idea in, because I think for us to understand these older kata, we need to think about the full range of techniques and tools which would have been there in the vocabulary when these kata were conceived or were being developed in the early stages. Okay, let's move on. If we go through the rest of the kata from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to jump forward a bit. You guys don't necessarily have to do so, but when we get to this position here, 1, 2, 3. So this 1, 2, 3 transition. I think this one relatively straightforward application of this is a sort of Tanio Toshi or Square Toshi, essentially a valley drop throw, right? So when we go in and use Jigotai and drop our weight and our center down below the other person's, to me that usually implies that we are taking a strong, stable stance in order to take their balance and throw them. And usually that implies going in behind their stance, although it doesn't necessarily have to be behind, it can be done from the front too. But very, very simply, we just work from a single strike. Punch comes in, yeah, I'm covering, moving in behind, and then I have this movement here, yeah, 1, yeah. So done slowly, you end up in what looks like a sort of soto-uke type position, right, for the arm. But one thing I've noticed, for example, when we look at Makishi Tetsuo sensei doing the kata, like two years ago, he did Wanshu kata in a demonstration on Kokusai Dori, one of the big Karate Day demonstrations. And his execution, this has energy and vibration as a strike, right? So again, one more time, coming in here, covering, moving in, dropping your weight in your center down below theirs. His belt's here, my belt's down below. I'm now in a very stable position, but I'm stuck right on the back of him. There's no space, no gaps. If you swing another punch at me, punch, yeah, I can cover that. Okay. So if it was a 1-2, I'd have cover for that, and then from here, this movement. So simple entry here, yeah, and then of course, you know, the technique repeats. Okay. Right. Guido sensei.
Oh, chapter 5. Okay. We go inside and outside. Yes. We make each knee and punch. So each knee suck. Inside. Perhaps we can do it from this. Break. Go in and punch. Yeah. So we make each knee and go inside. It's my version. Okay. It's a fast version. So if Martin has other.
Thank you very much. The main one that I would consider would be actually, James, very similar to your, well, not similar, the same as yourself, the stepping behind and throwing, and that's when I'm putting an image in my head for performance, that's what I think about. I may just say that in keeping with what I previously mentioned in terms of body crashing, the idea of stepping in or sever stepping to the person is a kind of another one that I would use in a long term. So if Rain is making a swinging blow at me, as I'm coming off, I want to use the stance to attack. Okay, I just hit her, so sorry. So I want to use the stance to attack or the stance to break their balance as I barge my way through the person. But my preference would be a taking down maneuver, such as the one that you demonstrated, James. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think, ideally, you want to get that position behind them. It's much easier to kind of off balance here. But you might find yourself in a slightly more sticky position, where you've ended up like this, right? And it's still doable, isn't it? You just, from here you can add leverage. The base, the entry and the base is basically the same position. So whether you never, of course, you never know exactly how they're going to punch or how they're going to move. If you get that ideal position behind, that's great. But let's say you ended up, like I said, here. Again, kind of the stickiness, the muchimi matters, right? If I leave spaces here, or these spaces here, then we've got pretty much the same leverage. All he needs to do is just sit down slightly, and he's got the same leverage as me. So I need to be in sticky, right? So that when I feel him move, then I can do here and use my base and the circular movement. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so cracking on. So we've got this one, here. So I'm going to be honest and say, for this last section of the kata, I don't have a lot of confidence in my interpretations of that last section as yet. Okay, this for me is the most difficult bit. Kind of getting to here, fine. Sliding, pulling back, pushing it in for the groin. Makes sense, right? I'm gonna try and tap the testicles in the groin to get him to lift his weight. But the transition from here to the idea that somehow I'm picking him up is a very difficult one, right? I mean, even someone my size, compared to my students, obviously significantly smaller than me, it's still not going to work, not practical. So, although in the kata we have this upward thrusting movement, in terms of the application, I tend to end up using more of a circular movement. So what I mean by that is, if I find myself in a position where I've gone in underneath and covered, and then gone for the groin, trying to get him to essentially lighten his stance, lighten his feet, then I'm more likely to go for a turning body drop. Rather than trying to take him, for example, up and over. It's just not going to work for me. So I want to use the principle of separating. Let's say, for example, that he's working on a grab, grab comes in. I want to use the principle of separating to break his stance, break his grip. The principle of attacking low, again, to break his stance. But then my energy is pulling back and rotating. And from that, I'm going to wrap up. Bring him in. Into this kind of position. So my application there deviates a little bit from the direction of the kata. Guido-sensei.
Okay, it's a little bit similar. Grabbing the hit, we make this motion up, down, punch, and now I come up, and throw.
Nicely
Okay.
done.
Yeah. So we have the movement when you go up. Block in, punch, and now he has his arms blocked. So I go up and bring him to a point where he's on his toes. And now I can throw him. Okay. Another version, only I go through, sorry, and go here. And I can't do it further, sorry. I go here and then I bring him down. It's very painful, okay? So I can only go this way and punch. Normally, he's here in this position. I go down and throw him. And he breaks his arms here and here. So that's the two versions that I have. Martin, perhaps you have?
Yeah, Guido, I particularly see the value in what you've just done. I think that's an excellent interpretation of it. So first of all, thank you very much for that. For me, I would say that I like this maneuver to be that if Lorraine is attacking with a blow at me, that as I drop her down. I want to come in and I want to catch this back leg, and then, well, with Lorraine it's a back leg, but perhaps with the gentleman it could be something else. But there's a throw that Funikawa sensei, and I had to check the name to make sure that I didn't get it right. Yaritama, which is to spear a ball throw. So I want to lift that back leg. When I catch that back leg, I want to pull down and lift up on this one. And then in my mind, the Kata is telling me to turn around. So lift the leg and turn around. And as I turn around, then I want to steal her balance and throw her onto the ground. And this is how I'm currently thinking about that movement.
Yeah, that's a really, really good mechanic. I can see that the mechanic of that works really, really well. Okay, well, I'm very, very happy that we've done this and we've kind of walked through the kata. Clearly, we've only really probably just touched the surface, but for me, it's been extremely valuable process to learn from you. I think what we could do for the last 10 minutes, not to go too long, but for the last 10 minutes, why don't we open up the mics and I'll go to the chat function and we'll pick up any questions or thoughts that people have come up with along the way. I didn't really get a chance to look at those during the session, so why don't we do that now? Yeah, MP. So Joel, you commented on the MP kata of Shotokan is very similar to Wanshu. Yeah, MP is a derivative of Wanshu kata, probably derived from at one point, or some styles, there's a Wanshu sho and a Wanshu dai, and it's possible that the Wanshu dai is was the version that Funakoshi learned and then used to essentially produce MP kata. David Still said, I feel it is possible the hidden punch could have been drawing a weapon at some point, knife or sai. David, yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I'd be good to have everybody else comment on this as well. Like we said, this kata comes from a period where weapons were very much, in use. And I'll confess, and I only did this for fun. There's a tradition in Okinawa that when somebody has a wedding, they ask their friends to come along and do some kind of performance during the wedding party. You do whatever you do, right? So if you're a karate person, you do some karate. Other people sing songs or do whatever. I decided one time a few years ago to do Wanshu kata using teko, so holding teko. I didn't start out with the teko in my hand. I started empty-handed, but in the turn, I took the teko out of my jacket, and then I had teko, and I was using teko. So the teko were effectively my hidden weapons, and it worked pretty well. Now, I'm not saying that this is like the original intent of Wanshu Kata. I'm just saying that it does feel like there are certain parts in that kata where you could be drawing a weapon and bringing a weapon into play. So I don't know, what do you guys think? Guido Sensei, Martin Sensei, other teachers, do you have that same kind of feel about Wanshu Kata?
If I may, I would say yes, most certainly you may be drawing a weapon. I would be cautious about suggesting that it's a knife, and I again would go back to the fact that all societies, one of the reasons that we function is that we agree to a set of rules. And then when you have a set of rules, you have people that break the rules, and then when you have people that break the rules, you have people that enforce the rules. So you end up with your judicial system. And so yes, I would say it could very well be for using a knife, drawing a weapon, but I would not go so far as to say a knife. And I'm not disparaging your performance with the teko either, James, but I would say that a teko and a knife, they're weapons of intent. Whatever a baton may be suggested in court that you're using a weapon of self-defense at whatever level that court is. The idea that you were using a knife or a sword or something like that, a spear for self-defense, I would find it hard to justify that. And that is such an essential part of self-defense, because there's no point in defending yourself against the physical attack and ending up spending life in jail, so or whatever punishment they were meting out at the time, depending on who you managed to do in. So drawing a weapon, yes, anyway, but just I'd be cautious about what kind of weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have to be careful when we talk about these things in theory, that we understand that these are not necessarily recommendations for applications in your actual societal situation. Yeah, we always have to use common sense there. One thing I would add, though, just to labor the point about weapons, one thing that I was told about sai was that in the past, when we buy sai today, we're told that they need to be, yay big, the size of your arm, and they're big and they're shiny, et cetera, and they're very visible. But I was told in the past that sai was a hidden weapon. It was something that would be tucked away in the kimono sleeve, for example. Yeah, it would be small enough to fit inside the kimono sleeve, so not as long as your arm. It might be more like a half the length of your forearm, or it would be something that would be tucked away in the sash. So again, the sash was wider, possible to hide things away in the back of that. So yeah, exactly like that, Guido-san. Yeah. So I was told that in the past, particularly the shuri gentry, it wouldn't be good for them to be seen carrying weapons. So but they had security concerns. They were a privileged class. They might be subject to attack or robbery or whatever else. So if they carried weapons, they were concealed weapons. And so, yeah, I think that also is a reflection of the state of the society that they find themselves in. I doubt that a traveling dignitary would have nothing available to them to defend themselves as a last measure. They would have some last sort of set of something that they could pull out to defend themselves at a last stage. Okay. I've had a couple of questions to show some things again. I won't do that because we're going to share the recording. You can go back and watch any part of this again as many times as you need. That's an interesting question from Dimitri. Wanshu, Wankan, and Rohai. Do some combinations on one side only. Why is this? Well, I would say that most kata have a right hand bias. And that just seems to be integral to the fact that it probably was most likely that you were going to deal with somebody who was right-handed. So when you look at kata and analyze them, most of them have a right-hand bias, but Do you have any additional thoughts on that, anybody?
No, I think it's because most people are right-handed, but you can do it both sides. Try it. It's nice, and it brings also your forward to your kata. I do it both sides. Yeah, it's also good for teaching when you're in front of the class. They do it the right side, and I do it the wrong side. So it's like a mirror. Yeah, so it's good for teaching also.
Yeah. I agree, absolutely agree. Okay, then let's take that one last comment here we've got from Simon Talbot, a very interesting one. I would be interested to hear if you have an opinion on the transfer of Chinese forms to Okinawa. Would the masters in Tomari adapt from extravagant deep stretches to a more natural body posture, but still bear in mind performance of Chinese visitors for applications, so leg grabs and sweeping moves more common? Okay. Yes. Okay. So we perhaps have a contrast today, in that we're often told today that Okinawan karate is based around natural movement and natural stances. Our Matsubayashiryu is built on fairly upright natural stances, although in our kata we do have some spots where we drop down into some deep stances before coming back up. One of the things that is interesting when you read the historical accounts of past Okinawan masters is that some of them were described as being extremely athletic. Makabe Choken was one. Arakaki Ankichi was another. They were famous for their flexibility, their high kicking ability, their general, extraordinary athleticism. So it's not the case that Okinawan karate has always been, the same for everybody, and there definitely were some proponents in the past who were noted for their extreme athletic ability. So going into deep stances, using jumping techniques, jumping kicking techniques, for example. It's interesting, recently I've been reading about Kushanku kata, and that, I read two things that were interesting. One is that the performance of Kushanku kata used to be done a lot more lightly, so with much less muscular tension, much less stress on the, much less of kind of the rigidity that we associate with modern sports karate, for example. But also that it was done in a very athletic fashion. So very light on the feet, a lot of jumping, a lot of movement, but not done with excessive tension. So that was an interesting thing that I kind of read recently from some accounts talking about, the difference between the way that karate is done today and the way that karate used to be done. I wonder if anybody else, do you have any other, thoughts or comments on this idea of, how the style of things has changed from the original transfer from China to now, for example?
I think the most commonly known one is probably that there was certain kata or forms were open hand in China, and then it appears that there was a preference to the closed fist on Okinawa, and that's probably about the best I can say, because the other techniques, I don't have enough experience in Chinese martial arts to place a big comment on it. I had an opportunity at one point to train with Miyahara Sensei in his dojo in Okinawa, and they were even though the stances appeared very big, they were looking to find an ideal structure. The stances were very big by comparison to Matsubayashiryu, right? Other styles, maybe it's more similar, but they were looking to find an optimal structure. But of course, when you broaden the base, as you've said with natural movement, when you broaden the base, you move away from natural movement, and that reduces your speed or places you in a situation where you're not stuck, but you're not as quick to react. I suppose not all change is progress, but once you know why you're making the change, or once you can explain why the change is made, it's probably okay. And I think that like Shoshin Sensei gave a good explanation of why he reinterpreted the principles to ensure that it was only with the most natural of movements that we'd use in our style. So yeah, sorry that I can't give a better answer.
No, it's very useful. Thank you. Would anybody else like to make a comment? That's kind of was the end of the questions that I picked up. So let's just take the last 2 or 3 minutes. If anybody would like to make a comment or any question at all, by all means, switch on your microphone and please do so.
Hi, Sensei Dmitry. I just wanted to say that I had the luxury of learning some Chinese forms back in days, and they're very, very, very long. And I can imagine, that's my imagination only. I can imagine when they tried to teach them in Okinawa, they had to split them on small pieces, and eventually it just went this way.
Yeah.
So there was some translation, lost in translation, basically.
I think that is a very, very realistic possibility and observation. I agree, absolutely. One thing that we are told is that often the transmission of forms is not in a teaching environment. There were demonstrations by the visitors, the Chinese visitors typically, the Okinawans observed and then went away and were inspired by what they'd seen to create something which was similar to what they'd seen. It's quite possible that some of those kata that we have today, that's how they originated. They were an interpretation, an inspiration. So and so they wouldn't have all the detail and they wouldn't be so long and etc. So yeah, and also, as you say, the teaching method might be that they just simply didn't have time or the ability to teach a very long form, right? So they just took one piece or 2 pieces or whatever.
Yeah, Wanshu lived 5 years with that family, so that's as much time as you could spend teaching them.
Exactly, yeah.
And I want to use this opportunity and thank you all. It was very, very much fun.
Thank you, Dimitri. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Any comments or questions? Okay, well, in that case, I want to say big thank you to everybody that joined us today for this workshop. I was very grateful to Guido Engels sensei and where's Martin gone? Martin sensei, Martin O'Malley sensei for your cooperation with this. I've learned a lot and I hope that we can do something similar again in the near future. Best wishes to everybody. Wish you all the best of health and hope to see you all again online. I will share the recording of this via email with everybody that attended and probably also after a little edit and cleanup, post this somewhere on the web for everybody to have a look at too. My intention with this is that we would share it on at least we would share it on the Matsubayashiryu Kata analysis group on Facebook. Okay, well, good morning, good evening. Thank you, everybody, and wish you all well.
Thank you very much, James.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. See you guys. Thanks a million. Thank you,
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Hi, Heinz.